Alright, so when it comes to getting a fursuit, there are a lot of options that you have to consider. We've actually gone through some of these options before, including what type of fursuit you want. You could start with just a head, build it up to a partial by adding the paws and a tail, or go all the way with a full bodysuit. However, if you do go with a full bodysuit like this, there's one big decision that you have to make to truly complete your look, and it has to do with a part of your body that kind of gets forgotten when it comes to fursuiting. That, of course, being your legs. Yep, when it comes to getting most fursuits, you have a big decision to make regarding how you want your fursuit legs to look. And there are two main options that you can choose from. You could go for a look that is commonly referred to as the Digitigrade look, or go with the look that is referred to as the Plantigrade look. Of course, there are pros and cons to each design, but when it came to designing my fursuit, I decided to go with the Plantigrade look for my legs, mainly because it makes a lot more sense for newer fursuiters like myself. Let me explain. Actually, before we dive too deep into making a decision between the two, let's talk about the two options you do have when getting your fursuit legs, because I don't want to assume that everyone knows what those words mean. I mean, seriously, Plantigrade and Digitigrade, those words are kind of weird and not something we normally say to describe things, except if you're a biologist, of course. So let's give them some definitions, and thankfully they're pretty easy to understand. When we refer to the bottom half of fursuits as Plantigrade or Digitigrade, we are actually referring to the way that real animals, mammals specifically, stand and walk on their feet. Plantigrade describes mammals that walk on the soles of their feet, with their legs standing perpendicular to the ground when standing still. If that looks or sounds familiar, then it shouldn't surprise you that we humans are plantigrade animals, and we typically walk on the flatter bottom halves of our feet. Another example of mammals that do this are bears. Even when they're on all fours, bears walk on the flat part of both their front and their hind paws. And it's what part of the feet that strikes the ground when walking is what differentiates animals who are plantigrade from digitigrade animals. Instead of walking and standing on the flat soles of their feet, digitigrade mammals walk upright on the toes of their feet, with their legs bending in that hook shape to keep balance on top of them. It's funny, you can actually get a decent idea of how this works if you stand on your toes but bend your legs to get back to your normal height. Obviously, it's a little unnatural for us humans to do, but a majority of mammals, including wolves, foxes, and even birds, walk and stand in this way. So that's the difference between the meaning of how mammals can walk, but what does that have to do with fursuiting? Well, if you think about it, differentiating the bottom half of fursuits as either plantigrade or digitigrade is pretty self-explanatory. At a high level, the whole point of fursuits is to look like an anthropomorphic version of an animal character, which is just a fancy way of saying that fursuits mix both human and animal elements into the overall character design. A big differentiator between humans and other mammals specifically is how we walk, and the best way to show that difference is in the design of the feet and the legs of a fursuit. If you want to add an even more animalistic look to a fursuit, you can have it be digitigrade to simulate you walking on the toes of your character. Or if you want to look a little more human-like in your suit, you can keep things straight and flat and keep a plantigrade look. Both are very viable, and honestly, I don't know if there's one option that is vastly more popular than the other. I see both all the time. But as you know, I went with the plantigrade option for my first fursuit, and I believe that of the two, going the plantigrade route is a great option for newer fursuiters in particular. Now, like I said before, both have their pros and cons, but there is one big pro that plantigrade fursuits have that is so important for those who are just getting into the activity. Plantigrade fursuits are a lot easier to walk in. And that makes sense, right? These suits are designed around the way that we as humans naturally walk. So for all intents and purposes, putting on and walking around in plantigrade fursuit legs is just like wearing sweatpants. Furry, colorful, carpet-like sweatpants, but you get the idea. And if you're like me and like to wear their fursuit for extended periods and do all sorts of movements while performing in it, it really does make a difference. Like, I'm pretty mobile in here, and the only limit that I have to my range of motion is the sewn seams that construct the fursuit itself. Now, that same freedom of movement can't really be said for most digitigrade fursuits, which, to simulate that look of walking on your toes, have to have padding added in and around the legs and thighs of the suit itself, which adds weight and general bulkiness to that area. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to move and walk around with them added on, but it simply takes more effort to move that much more mass around, and it's just another thing that wears you down and heats you up when walking around in suit. And there are other side effects that not needing that padding frees you up from when using your fursuit. fursuit. Without padding, a Plantigrade fursuit is easier to pack and travel with, since you can just fold it up on itself and be ready to get right back in it once you unfold it. This is in contrast to Digitigrade suits, which you could either try and travel with the padding still in, or do what most people do and take the padding out and store it separately and add it back into the legs before getting into it. Again, on the surface, it's not a huge deal, but those extra steps needed to deal with the padding add up over time. And of course, not needing the added padding and engineering the fursuit around this look leads to Plantigrade fursuits being less expensive than their Digidegrade counterparts. And depending on the maker's implementation, going with a Planti suit over a Digi can yield some significant savings. I'm talking hundreds, if not thousands of dollars that can be shaved off the bottom line of that fursuit order. All in all, going with a Plantigrade suit just means that there's less to think about when it comes to performing in the fursuit itself. And again, all of that might not sound like it's significant, but when added up over the life of a fursuit, it can really make a big difference. Now, just like going Plantigrade, there is one major reason to get a Digidegrade suit that basically renders everything I just said pretty meaningless. We are at the point with fursuit design that Digidegrade fursuits just look a lot better, at least in my opinion. Specifically, Digitigrade suits really do sell that illusion that you are an anthropomorphic version of the mammal of your persona. So if that is your ultimate aim, to look as close to your persona as possible, then you won't really care about all the dumb, pragmatic advantages that Planti suits have. You're going to go for that Digitigrade look. And it really does work. Just anecdotally, I really like the look of well-made Digidegrade suits, and they tend to be more well-received by the average onlooker. Again, mainly because they really are selling that walking on your toes look, which, depending on the person or what they're going for, can actually yield a more enjoyable fursuiting experience. It's another thing you could add to really sell the idea that you are an anthro version of an animal character, or a definitional furry. And that's not all. I've seen suits that have carefully placed the zippers where the padding is added and hide them very well, which technically makes going full Digidegrade optional, since you can leave the padding out and get all the benefits of going Planti. But when you're ready to look the part, you can add that padding back in and get the full experience all at your own leisure. Now, I'm sure you all know this, but I do want to say that looks are very subjective. Just because I like the look of Digidegrade suits a lot better doesn't mean that the suits themselves are any better or worse than Plantigrade ones. I've actually seen people be creeped out by that much realism and maybe more comfortable perceiving anthro animals standing and walking like humans. But if you know me, you know my brain always keeps practicality in mind, and when it came to getting my first fursuit, the suit that I knew I was going to make videos in and want to run around in cons with, I was willing to sacrifice that quote-unquote perfect look for something that is just easier to deal with day to day. That being said, like most other things when it comes to fursuiting, it's all up to you and your preference and what you value most when it comes to performing as these wearable pieces of art. Because at the end of the day, fursuits are still one of the best ways to express the idea of actually being anthropomorphic versions of our favorite animal characters, no matter how you stand. Alright, that's it. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next one, but until then, stay wild out there. Peace.